So let's start with Close. It is Dhont's relatively unknown director. Have either of you seen any of his films before?
I don't.
No, but I think Girl made a splash when it came out a few years ago. I remember seeing posters for it and thinking...
So it's a film about a very beautiful friendship that between two, or very tender friendship, very close friendship between two young boys, one of them somewhat effeminate, that has kind of homoerotic tones to it. A tragedy occurs that...
we can spoil this, it's fine.
There's a tragedy in the middle. And the camera works very, very intimate, very shallow depth of field. It seems to be putting forward a politics of a cinema of intimacy almost. But the direct way it approaches this intimacy, I found a little too on the nose.
George, you felt
too close, perhaps.
A bit too close, exactly. It's a film called Close, and all the shots are close.
Too close for
I think that's maybe...
Yeah. It was a close call.
Yeah.
I feeling about the film, but your feelings have evolved, I believe, George.
Well, no, I flagged up that immediately after watching, you should have a content warning. It was a film,
an emotive content warning,
which at every notch was intent on dialing up the emotional payload to the point where you were, a shivering wreck. That was what it was angling for. But as so often with these films, the last time I had such a comparably large impression that then left no trace the following morning was Killing of a Sacred Deer by...
Oh, you found that moving?
No, not moving, unsettling in a way.
Okay.
It's particularly a final scene, and then of course there was nothing.
Actually,
the next day,
and also the father
Killing of
you
a Sacred Deer
with Anthony Hopkins.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Films that are. I think the thing is with film is it's not enough. It's not enough just to move people. In fact, it's quite easy to make someone cry. But the tears one might have after Bresson are quite different from the tears one might have after a kind of quite average film about a topic that happens to be quite near the knuckle.
So the tears of Umberto D are not the tears of the father feeling.
Well, these are tears of these are tears of comfort in a way. This is not it's not a deeply disconcerting film. It's like it is a confirmation of emotion. It's presenting a particular kind of exegesis on grief. I didn't learn anything about grief from this film. It wasn't one. Whereas even The Father, which is an inferior film, I think, does present grief in a kind of much more ambiguous way because he's losing. He is grieving for himself because you only ever see his world. His dementia through his own fractured mind palace.
But formally it's a bit more exciting because of all the
But this was formally exciting way. There are certain things about it that I enjoyed. So the shallow depth of field was interesting. It was good. This decision to commit for 95% of the film to a very shallow depth of focus. We rarely depart from the young boys' faces or the faces of the adults who concernedly look at them and try and kind of soothe him through the tragedy that he experiences. So you don't really depart. That had some problems when there were kind of highly dynamic scenes like ice hockey or running or cycling. The proximity is quite nauseating at times.
Well, I think we also agreed that at such moments it just became basically the vernacular of prestige TV.
Yeah. Thank you. There's very much, or just a vernacular of art house. Of middle of the road art house films where you have these harsh cuts. I mean, the thing I'd most like to highlight is this form of cutting where you have something very quiet and then suddenly something very loud. And because this guy was playing ice hockey a lot, we frequently had moments where we would have him in a room on his own having an intimate moment, and then we would suddenly cut to him sort of clattering around this ice hockey with a sort of a off-screen coach who would be shouting in Flemish crudely. Meanwhile, these very tender French scenes would happen with the mother of his best friend and so on.
I think childhood is such kind of fertile ground for film, but it's also it can lapse into the halcyon and the hackneyed very easily. Which the beginning where they set up the relationship between these two boys, I think is exceptional where it's ambiguous. So the kind of almost a quasi-eroticism of their relationship, if you want to call it that. There are other elements of it where they have to demonstrate bonding that were a little bit lazy and a little bit, uninteresting. I glazed over mentally for a lot of that.
That being said, the performances were immense.
Astonishing.
And so it was possible to just do something as simple as a bit of play fighting and conjure up huge emotion.
And the main kid will, I said it felt like seeing Christian Bale in Empire of the Sun or something.
So there's some good tone shifts in the film. Here we go. George is going to let loose another...
Sponsored by whatever the fuck you're drinking.
Schmack. So there are some amazing tone shifts in the film because by setting up this big payload of this very intimate, close relationship, obviously something's going to happen in a way. We know it does. And there's an amazing... After the two boys kind of begin to split. Basically, their relationship begins to... The kind of innocent, naive beauty of their love and their friendship begins to split apart when that love is set in school. So they arrive at school and suddenly intimations of, homophobia and kind of bullying they get begin to drag them apart. There's an amazing scene, one of the few times where Dhont pulls away into the distance.
We get distance, yeah.
Yeah, is when they arrive in the schoolyard and there's all these other kids suddenly. They both look a bit lost. And the camera slowly pans out, draws out, and we lose their conversation. So their conversation melds into the mix of all these other kids chattering.
That's very nice.
And we see all the other kids arriving in their cliques, yeah. But there was a film like this is just so profoundly either knowingly indifferent or openly contesting kind of main insights of... Brecht. It's like, get as close as possible, form the strongest attachment possible, and at no point do you allow anybody to achieve distance from these characters. So
it's very interesting.
The closeness of the title then takes on an interest in an additional dimension, right? Because it's not just their closeness to one another.
There's an essay by Danny Hayward about art of immediacy.
Yeah, I was thinking exactly about that.
And I think there is a stream, whereas in the past somewhat radical thinkers would adopt this Brechtian approach of truth through distance and alienation. There is now a kind of a more direct sort of notion in the air that in order to achieve truth we must be constantly intimate.
But it's interesting to see, because at this point the immediacy effects have been developed through various different other filmmaking strategies, and they're all deployed here. I was saying it's a kind of encyclopedia of immediacy effects. So you have the Foley's, the swirly Foley kind of moment when he's playing ice hockey, hits the floor, and suddenly it's
Ugh. And then this
the muffling.
Come and see was the reference point there. This when you EQ it, so it's all really and then you have this feeling, which is this concussion notion.
Which is used a couple of times when he's also running to his friend's house, or Kurstami.
Yeah.
Again, it kind of muffles, and it is a little bit Netflix.
It just doesn't trust its own tools, really. It has so much going for it, and it overuses music and overuses a sort of wavy, shaky cinematography of
I think we agreed it could have been entirely diegetic.
Pretty much.
One of the boys is a oboist who's kind of... he's maybe got talent, but he's juvenile. He's very good. There's a great scene, great recital when he's kind of 4 times too fast and he slows down. And,
So the imperfections of his delivery are very moving.
Impeccable,
That's great character development actually there, because we sense his own in personal terminology. Because you've got one happy-go-lucky child and one who's quite sullen and a bit depressed, and the disappointment in his face in that moment after he plays, and he's obviously this is a huge moment for him, and it cuts between his friend's face who's
having this Anna Karina in the Andrea moment. His
well,
face is covered in tears.
Also narratively, I think it does struggle with this hinge moment in the middle of the film, and beforehand you are dealing with this very interesting and subtle, and we've all spoken about it, male, prepubescent male friendship, the tensions of having an unusual level of closeness with one other person in that kind of school, primary school era, is something you don't see very often on screen, and not that makes it more.
And
or
learning
less
the protocols of detachment, and he has to learn
learning that it's not cool to be that close to someone.
And the attachments he has to form instead are to kind of abstract entities, football teams, football players.
It's kind of, he has to
and
perform
work.
his
He's working
masculinity
as well.
in a little way.
Well, that's why I said it was a socialist realist film.
Oh, it's because he gains all his status through work.
Exactly, yeah.
How the steel was tempered.
Also, there's alienation in it.
how the flowers were tempered. I don't know. Yeah. But there's an amazing. So talking about those tone shifts again, it's an excellent tone. We both. I think we all like this bit where they have this split. They have two physical fights in the film, and they're both again shot very intensively, very close up. You lose the track of bodies in the shot. It's amazing. And then you get this scene where it cuts to night, or I guess very early morning, when they're ploughing the fields before they've been tenderly plucking the flowers from the branches. And now you've got this big plough, I guess, machine. It's a Days of Heaven
style, reaping the harvest, but it's like
reap what you sow.
Quite menacing. You know?
So so it kind of chops down all these flower heads basically, and you get it's shot in this really mucky blue, silver, dark, high contrast light scene. It's amazing. It's very on the nose, but I mean this is a film of exaggerations where everything is kind of heightened to excess.
It's gonna go gangbusters. This film will be everywhere for at least 2 years.
You will be seeing
it.
I
think it's been picked up by Mubi. I think it will do similarly to, not that I'm a box office guru, but I think it will do similarly to Worst Person in the World. It will be the first. This director is several features deep, but this is his breakout, I think, and it will be spoken about, and it will probably be washed. It will probably be pink washed. No, not pink. It will be lathered in kind of the homoeroticism that it evokes. As a discourse point, and it will do well,
which would be a shame because the
film
largely avoids making it explicit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's what's quite nice about it, and it's quite ambiguous, and I'm quite relatable in that sense. Not that ambiguity and relatability necessarily correlate, but yes. So I think the overriding feeling is that close is a bit too close, or its relation to the idea of closeness formally is. It
didn't know
simplistic.
how to negotiate its own distance on the other flip side. So what it had is one of the problems I had with it when I walked out of the cinema was its coherence, I suppose, and its desire, its desperation to close any loops that had been formed during the film. Everything had to be resolved, and what are introduced are a couple of other quite heavy-handed metaphors, quite literally. He breaks his arm playing ice hockey,
I forgot about that. It's terrible.
and then the healing process of the bone is the healing process of his own, love, basically. And it's a very heavy-handed, unnecessary extra, adds an extra 20 minutes to the film.
Heavy-handed, broken-handed.